of the Jubitz Family Foundation, and we were in the same room, and he asked me, "Oh, so you just got your degree in that field, so I want to end all war, what should we do?" So I told him, "Hire me and let's get started." So since then I've been working there. There are many efforts already worldwide that are wonderful efforts to abolish war, and we see more and more literature in the field now, research, practice-based, theoretical, that are outlining real alternatives to war, and all of those add to a more complete picture. And I think half of the people who are going to be at this conference have written a book or a few on that topic. As some of you know, I'm also one of the co-authors of this booklet, whatever you want to call it here, which is called The Alternative Global Security System, an Alternative to War. In my work as a peace researcher, I've come across many strategies to end war, and I'm certainly not an expert on every single one of them, but all of them I see as part of a system, and that is what we also try to describe in this book. That is the work that many of you here in this room and beyond do, and that is the work that we need to continue strengthening and where we need to build upon. And I want to focus today a little bit on a section in the book which is new in this 2016 edition, because we published one more than a year ago already. And that is using this whole concept of an alternative global security system as a movement building tool. So I want to just very briefly tell you what this alternative global security system concept is, and you're going to hear me say that over and over again. And many of the components will be very familiar to you. Then I will share some challenges that we're facing in building a movement, and then I spend the rest of the time outlining a few opportunities and how I think this concept can really be used as a tool to build a movement. So first and foremost, this book is guided by a vision of peace, and this includes, among other elements, a world without war, a world safe for our children, and climate change halted, global warming. In its body, the report analyzes the current war system, outlines how the concept of common security can replace national security, and then core to the report are multiple strategies for demilitarizing security, managing conflicts without violence, and creating a culture of peace. And I really like that whole idea of common security in there. No one is safe until all are safe. So a few challenges that we're facing in building a movement. Those who benefit from war and violence control the discourse, the facts, the media, the resources, etc. You all know that. The myths about war, they're out there and they prevail. Communicating on ending war is often considered part of political discourse, the liberal left in the political system, the peace brand. We need to examine this whole peace brand. When we as individuals or as organizations try to reach other sectors like the business community or political conservatives, we need to examine how do we approach them. Because we need to include other sectors in our vision of ending war on a global scale. Then also another challenge is those involved in large issues like ending war, we're facing a lack of resources because like-minded organizations compete for a very limited pool of those resources, probably even within our room here, because all of us have our most important issue that we're working on. Next point, movement funding is difficult, and I work for a foundation also. Straightforward, measurable, fact-based campaigns are easy to fund. Ending an institution like war, building a movement, anti-war, it's controversial. Funders tend to shy away from that kind of advocacy. Because we're talking about a whole paradigm shift there. So even though there might be foundations out there who talk about, we're involved in peace funding, that's their stated objective, but if we look at kind of the paradigm shift that it implies, it might actually be contradictory to what the philanthropic interests are there. And finally, for many, the whole notion of ending war is a challenge. It's too big, it's unachievable. But well, I'd say if we stick our head in the sand, then it's not going to happen either. It's not going to go away. So let me discuss some opportunities. The first one is communication. Communication on war and peace issues is accompanied by multiple symbols and symbolism. And there's the whole, sometimes the why can't we all get along narrative. Well, that's not enough. Especially in Western peace movements, we have several recurring symbolic elements. The peace sign, doves, olive branches, people holding hands, and all kinds of variations of the globe there. So they are generally non-contentious, and I like them, but they fail to communicate tangible meanings of peace. Especially when we're juxtaposing war and peace, we see the images and symbolism of the destruction of war, and then we have those traditional peace signs. So if we use this alternative global security system concepts, we can provide humans with a new vocabulary, with what is needed to fully understand the war system, how to demilitarize security, how to manage conflicts without violence, and create a culture of peace. I think this concept in itself is a powerful alternative narrative to the consisting one that prevails, and we can own that. There's a broad framework for communicating on all those alternatives to war that we outline there in multiple contexts. And that allows us really to back up our points when we say, well, there is no military solution. You don't want war, so what then? Well, yeah, we have it all in here. Might sound and that's not we as in World Beyond War. We as a community who's already dealt with those issues. We know how to do it. And we can own that. We can really be confident now. And we're still building more and more knowledge like Brenna was showing us in her presentation. The concept here is also broad. That means it can reach more bystanders who are not involved in those issues by tapping into their topics like climate change, gun violence, death penalty. We can make connections there. So when we as, for example, World Beyond War communicate, we can address the institution of war as a negative one, but at the same time, we can communicate multiple positive alternatives that are out there, that exist, that are real, that are proven to be effective. My next point is a little bit connected to communication. Is I call it making it palatable to mainstream audiences or getting beyond the choir. If we appeal to some of the more common societal values, and I'm talking about this context because that's the one where we are operating right now. We're doing something that powerful elites have successfully practiced already for their own purposes. So we have many opportunities in this global security system concept to get involvement within what is considered an acceptable societal narrative. So we're alienating less people. I think a good example there in a different context is 350.org. If we look at their campaigns for Stop the Keystone XL pipeline or divest from fossil fuels, they were really able to get beyond the traditional environmental movement to large-scale social action and involvement. And I think probably also through youth involvement on that level, like you talked about it. If we look at these concepts, anti-war activists can situate their work and connect it to trends that address hunger, poverty, racism, the economy, climate change, and several other factors. And then a specific mention I want to give to peace research and peace education. So we can now talk about peace science. There are 600 undergraduate and graduate programs worldwide in conflict resolution, conflict studies, K through 12 peace education. And that demonstrates that it is becoming more and more mainstream and accepted. In fact, just a few days ago, I met with a delegation from Oxford University. They are planning to establish a peace center at Oxford in England. So that's pretty established, I heard. And in my organization, we created what is called the Peace Science Digest, where we try to make peace research accessible, understandable, and useful. So things are happening in that area too. When we frame the rhetoric and the goals of ending war in a way that is more acceptable to, we call, mainstream audiences, some might say that's a co-optation of the movement. But I think if we challenging and also pulling in other audiences that are not with us. My next point on the opportunities is funding. So there was a challenge, but there's also the opportunity. The huge unnamed movement in blessed unrest, how Paul Hoffman called it, is hard to fund. Funders don't get involved in advocacy, even I think that's perceived even more so if it's controversial, like anti-anything, you know? So the language in this concept here is not necessarily fundable in terms of programs, but the systemic approach can create opportunities for funding and funding collaborations across movements. The next point is a broader network. So it is obvious that no movement can act in isolation of its social context or in isolation of other movements. So this alternative global security system concept offers a mental and practical framework to connect the disconnected. While the recognition of the interrelatedness of those different elements is not really new, we're still lacking something in the practical implementation of making those connections. So abolishing war is the primary focus, but cross-movement support and collaboration is now possible because there's a broad range of issues outlined in here. And this is absolutely necessary for us to transcend the peace choir. So involving folks involved in immigration reform, Black Lives Matter, American Muslims, youth-driven efforts. I like the idea of youth-driven, not only trying to invite youth to be part of that, but let them drive it and frame it. I learned that today. That all is necessary to build a strong movement infrastructure. Another point is this concept allows us to maintain what I call continued organizational identity. So there's a unifying language where different social movement organizations can pertain to alliances without losing their own organizational or movement identity or their cause. So we can identify our work with an aspect of this global security system concept and connect our work of being part of that without having to give that up. So I look around and I know several of the people here. So we have efforts, counter-recruitment, unarmed civilian peacekeeping, abolish nuclear weapons, against drone fare, abolish NATO, peace education. All those are necessary, and everyone should continue those efforts. But we can place them within a broader context without giving them up, without giving in. We're experts at one thing, not necessarily at the other thing, but we're part of something whole. Which leads me to the next point, which is synergy. If we recognize that alternative global security system, we can achieve synergy. A peace researcher colleague, Houston Wood, and I quote him, wrote, "Peace and justice individuals and organizations across the world now form an emergent global peace consciousness that is different and more powerful than the sum of its dispersed parts." And he adds that linked elements of the network will increase in range and density, opening even more space for growth. So he projects that he calls it a global peace network, will grow even more powerful in the decades ahead. But we have to continue building it. It's not going to happen by itself. And I think also a systemic concept like that offers alternatives gives us renewed hope. When we realize that there's actually a system that partially exists, that we can build, that we can strengthen, I think people will be inspired to act and work and build that system. That gives me hope, at least. So let me conclude. The focus of World Beyond War, that our organization, or the anti-war movement is clear: abolish the failed institution of war. Nevertheless, a re-energized and anti-war movement has a unique opportunity to enter into coalitions and alliances where members recognize that a global security system includes more than just the absence of war, where people identify themselves and their work as part of the effort to strengthen that system. We have opportunities for education, networking, and action. Coalitions at this level can potentially create the counterbalance we need to that currently dominating war narrative through an active creation of this new story and the new reality. I think when we look at that, we shouldn't think about a nonviolent utopia. The institution and practice of war can be abolished. It's socially constructed, and it's still overwhelming. But when we look at peace, we can also look at it as an ongoing process of our human evolution, where we constructively, non-violently resolve conflicts. And if that is the predominant way, then I think we have achieved what we need to achieve. And my final words on kind of tying it back into the title of the panel, Strategies to End War. If we insist that one strategy is the only path toward a world beyond war, I think we will fail. But if we recognize that the strategy we feel most strongly about, where we can dedicate our time, where we are experts, where we have resources, when we see that this is part of a larger system, and if we are willing to connect those parts in the system without giving up our own role, we can build and strengthen the system. And then we can move toward a world beyond war. Thank you.